Typhoon by Joseph Conrad, narrated by Scott Brick. This unabridged audiobook was produced in year 2003 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Neither the recording nor any part thereof may be reproduced without the prior written consent of Tantor Media, Incorporated. Polish-born English novelist Joseph Conrad crystallized his often-quoted goal as a writer. My task, which I am trying to achieve, is, by the power of the written word, to make you hear, to make you feel. It is, above all, to make you see. That, and no more, and it is everything. Conrad's works of extreme subtlety, sophistication, and technical complexities, and the unprecedented way in which he communicates a pessimist's view of man's personal and social destiny, established him as one of the first English modernists. Critics consider him to be the single most important innovator of 20th century literature. Many of his novels drew material, events, and personalities from his own experiences in different parts of the world. His most popular works are Heart of Darkness, influenced by his journey up the Congo River, where he learned about atrocities made by Congo explorers, Lord Jim, drawn from his career in the British Navy, and Nostromo. Conrad's novels had a significant impact on other 20th century writers, including Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Eliot, Sartre, and Green. Several of Conrad's stories have been made into film, most notably Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, based on Heart of Darkness, and Alfred Hitchcock's Sabotage, based on The Secret Agent. Joseph Theodor Conrad Korzeniowski was born in 1857 in the Russian part of Poland. His parents were punished for their Polish nationalist activities, and the family was exiled to northern Russia. At age 12, after both of his parents had died of tuberculosis, Conrad was sent to live with his uncle in Switzerland. During his youth, he attended schools in Krakow, was involved in arms smuggling for the Carlist cause in Spain, and joined the French merchant marine. Conrad continued his naval career for 16 years in the British Merchant Navy, and in 1886 commanded his own ship, the Otago. In the same year, he became a British citizen and changed his name to Joseph Conrad. Conrad sailed to many parts of the world, including Australia, the West Indies, South America, and the Congo River. It was during these long journeys that he started to write. At the age of 36, Conrad ended his sea career, devoted himself entirely to literature, and settled in England. 2 years later, he married an Englishwoman, by whom he had 2 sons. Despite the immediate critical recognition of his major novels, they did not sell well. The family lived in relative poverty until the commercial success of Chance in 1913. Having finally received acclaim, he was offered a knighthood in 1923, which he declined. Joseph Conrad died of a heart attack 1 year later. Far as the mariner on highest mast can see all around upon the calmed vast, so wide was Neptune's hall. Keats. Author's note. The main characteristic of this volume consists in this, that all the stories composing it belong not only to the same period, but have been written one after another in the order in which they appear in the book. The period is that which follows on my connection with Blackwood's magazine. I had just finished writing The End of the Tether and was casting about for some subject which could be developed in a shorter form than the tales in the volume of Youth, when the instance of a steamship full of returning coolies from Singapore to some port in northern China occurred to my recollection. Years before, I had heard it being talked about in the East as a recent occurrence. It was for us merely one subject of conversation amongst many others of the kind. Men earning their bread in any very specialized occupation will talk shop, not only because it is the most vital interest of their lives, but also because they have not much knowledge of other subjects. They have never had the time to get acquainted with them. Life, for most of us, is not so much a hard as an exacting taskmaster. I never met anybody personally concerned in this affair, the interest of which for us was, of course, not the bad weather, but the extraordinary complication brought into the ship's life at a moment of exceptional stress by the human element below her deck. Neither was the story itself ever enlarged upon in my hearing. In that company, each of us could imagine easily what the whole thing was like. The financial difficulty of it, presenting also a human problem, was solved by a mind much too simple to be perplexed by anything in the world except men's idle talk, for which it was not adapted. From the first, the mere anecdote, the mere statement, I might say, that such a thing had happened on the high seas appeared to me a sufficient subject for meditation. Yet it was but a bit of a sea yarn after all. I felt that to bring out its deeper significance, which was quite apparent to me, something more was required. A leading motive that would harmonize all these violent noises, and a point of view that would put all that elemental fury into its proper place. What was needed, of course, was Captain Mac Whirr. Directly I perceived him, I could see that he was the man for the situation. I don't mean to say that I ever saw Captain Mac Whirr in the flesh, or had ever come in contact with his literal mind and his dauntless temperament. Mac Whirr is not an acquaintance of a few hours, or a few weeks, or a few months. He is the product of 20 years of life. My own life. Conscious invention had little to do with him. If it is true that Captain Mac Whirr never walked and breathed on this earth, which I find for my part extremely difficult to believe, I can also assure my readers that he is perfectly authentic. I may venture to assert the same of every aspect of the story, while I confess that the particular typhoon of the tale was not a typhoon of my actual experience. At its first appearance, Typhoon, the story, was classed by some critics as a deliberately intended storm piece. Others picked out Mac Whirr, in whom they perceived a definite symbolic intention. Neither was exclusively my intention. Both the Typhoon and Captain Mac Whirr presented themselves to me as the necessities of the deep conviction with which I approached the subject of the story. It was their opportunity. It was also my opportunity, and it would be vain to discourse about what I made of it in a handful of pages, since the pages themselves are here, between the covers of this volume, to speak for themselves. This is a belated reflection. If it had occurred to me before, it would have perhaps done away with the existence of this author's note. For indeed the same remark applies to every story in this volume. None of them are stories of experience in the absolute sense of the word. Experience in them is but the canvas of the attempted picture. Each of them has its more than one intention. With each, the question is what the writer has done with his opportunity. And each answers the question for itself in words which, if I may say so without undue solemnity, were written with a conscientious regard for the truth of my own sensations. And each of those stories, to mean something, must justify itself in its own way to the conscience of each successive reader. Falk, the second story in the volume, offended the delicacy of one critic at least by certain peculiarities of its subject. But what is the subject of Falk? I personally do not feel so very certain about it. He who reads must find out for himself. My intention in writing Falk was not to shock anybody. As in most of my writings, I insist not on the events, but on their effect upon the persons in the tale. But in everything I have written there is always one invariable intention, and that is to capture the reader's attention, by securing his interest and enlisting his sympathies for the matter in hand, whatever it may be, within the limits of the visible world and within the boundaries